Musings of a Storyteller, a short story by Dan McDowell. Jake Fletcher and I met for coffee for the first time in years last October. It wasn't that we'd lost touch entirely. We just let the busy factor of our lives create some time and separation. As for the shop, it was the perfect sort of cozy, small town setting, really. The place where you get the scoop on what's really going on in the community. Tired moms, deacons, divorcees, HOA presidents. No matter where you sat, if you just stayed quiet a minute, you'd figure out what you needed to. As our orders were called, Jake and I took a minute to catch up, and then we got down to business.
Yeah. So the main reason I was hoping to catch up,
He said,
was to learn more about your journey as a storyteller. What drew you to it? Why do you do it? I mean, most people don't just wake up and say, I want to write a power tool instruction manual. But on the flip side, I don't think many of us wake up and say, I want to build a new place. A place to take people away from life and escape. Most of us just want to find that place of escape someone else has already made.
I could prolong any one of those points quite a while, I said, sipping on my white mocha. But I won't. It boils down to one simple truth. We are consuming more than we create. And if there aren't more of us creating, we will eventually run out of things to consume.
I guess.
He said, struggling to make eye contact. He and I had always been on a different wavelength from each other, but it was the contrast that made our relationship steady and interesting, like peanut butter and jelly. Not enough of an answer? I asked. He shook his head. The places of escape, whether good or evil, light or dark, happy or sad, they pull us away from the mundane, the things we see every day that we're tired of. And though I can't recommend that we do that around the clock, an hour here or there beats any medicine or therapy by a long shot.
You think so?
He asked, studying the side of his coffee cup. Definitely. It's my fuel.
So, what does a guy like me do to get started? I feel like I have a million ideas, but I can't pin one down. I just feel like I'm too methodical.
Everybody has their way of approaching things, I said. For me, I love the adventure of not knowing. The method was to not have much of a method. I'd work with a broad brush on the front end and then fine-tune as the story took shape.
I don't think I can do that,
He said.
I need a blueprint.
Lots of people do. And sometimes, someone finds a method, and it works well. Look at all these best-selling series that have been produced. Whether fiction or nonfiction, people like to return to a familiar place that's just different enough to keep them interested. But here's the part that will really help a story shine. Figure out how to put a small tear in reality. A little slit in the fabric is all it takes to find a new world. His phone lit up.
Hey, I'm sorry. I've got to get running.
I understand. Why don't we do this again soon? Maybe you can tell me more about how your project is coming, what you've pinned down to write about. He stood up and threw his coffee in the trash.
That sounds good.
I pulled a book from my bag. Hey, I'm going to share something with you that really shaped my storytelling journey. He looked at the book a minute and back at me nervously, like he was in a hurry. Admittedly, the spine was unmarked, and it looked like it had weathered many seasons, but that book was everything to me. The genesis of my storytelling career.
Yeah, thanks.
He said.
See you later.
As he looked at me once more, there was an unspoken sort of cry from the depths of his soul. I just couldn't decipher what it was. A year later, it's hard for me to admit this, but I haven't been able to tell a story for months. My portal to escape was sealed up back in April when I heard the news. Jake and I hadn't exactly followed up on our next meeting in person. We'd shared a few messages, some encouraging texts, but failed to discuss any further, and as such, I failed as his mentor to follow through. Much as it grieved me to say it, with Jake's untimely death, my creative well traveled into the great beyond with him. The tear in my reality, the slit in my fabric. It had been heavily weighed down with this shocking loss. It left me wondering, if I left this world sooner than people would expect, would the same void exist over me months later, like it had for him within me? Even though we hadn't talked as much as we should have, Jake's influence over my life was essential, and I was reminded of the gravity of making the most of every second we have while we have it. And so, here I am, stuck in the bottom of my own creative well, struggling to find even a morsel or scrap to pull from. It's bone dry, and I can't help but feel like Jake has it. I'd been close with the family before, and even though it would be inappropriate to ask, I often wondered, maybe if I did go back to them and ask about the book I'd lent to Jake, if I could ever get it back or ever be able to look at it the same. I was wandering around in a sort of desert in my mind. Had I given Jake something he wasn't ready for? Had my very tools for creativity and living been the catalyst for his ticket to the exact opposite? A guilt began to linger within me. And as I sipped on my coffee one afternoon, taking in the conversations of the area, my pen and paper in hand and absolutely no stories to tell, I felt a sort of clarity for a moment. Jake reassuring me the book, as a tool, had been a great help to him. I ran into a relative of Jake's later that afternoon at the store and continued to offer my true condolences over the tragedy, the loss. And as we connected in a genuine moment of solidarity, I wrapped them up in a warm embrace. Jake, our common bond, was somewhere between us. As we prepped to part ways, I asked about the book. The relative shook their head, said his apartment was completely cleaned out. Not a speck of dust left or any remnants of Jake to be seen. He'd taken care of everything before he passed on. And so I accepted the unfortunate truth that my great source of inspiration, a special gift from my own grandfather, had vanished with Jake. Halloween night. A few days went by and I ended up at the coffee shop again. My usual cozy corner, the white mocha, my pen and paper in hand, the typical chatter in full motion. And I remembered my afternoon again with Jake. We'd sat at the same table, I'd drunk from the same chipped mug, and the only difference was the empty seat across from me. Again, I felt this sort of peace wash over me in the moment. I'd done what I could for Jake, and that he was at rest. As the evenings arrived quicker, the darkness lingered longer and the typical autumn season took greater hold. I prepped for the coming weeks. Not in my storytelling, but in my normal life, my day job. The things that offered me a livelihood that weren't my creativity. And yet, there was a sort of void within me. Something I couldn't fulfill in carrying out the ordinary. My life lacked that tear for the creativity to spill through. I went through the motions of the corporate slog, the break room coffee, the employee of the month assemblies, the global town halls, and then finally it was here. Halloween night had arrived. I opted to swing by the coffee shop to get that taste of the season. Not with pumpkin spice, but instead with my usual. I thought if there was ever a time to let go of the heartache, to surrender the loss of Jake and my creative edge, Halloween would do the trick. I sat down in my usual spot. I'd put things to rest once and for all. It wouldn't be in some scary, demented ritual, just an unspoken rite of passage. I'd throw my pen and paper in the garbage and wipe the slate clean. A fresh start, a dedication to Jake. And so, as the evening went on, kids and families came through in their costumes, their Halloween buckets, and so on for the first hour or so, and then it got eerily quiet. I didn't have any big plans, so I stayed put, giving plenty of time for my sterile, corporate-friendly attire to absorb the pumpkin spice aroma. And I felt like I could finally begin to surrender what I felt I'd lost when I lost Jake. For a moment, I began to wander away into another realm in my subconscious. I don't think it was anything uncommon after a long day at work or a little too much coffee in me. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the empty seat across from me wasn't empty. There's no ghost, nor an unannounced guest. Just my missing book. Returned, its ugly spine, its worn edges, even the smell of the aged pages. And the thing of it was, this was not a common text. Not one that just anyone had. It was that book with a history. A storyteller of its own kind. As I studied the room, I looked around, and other than the barista, it was just us. I approached the counter and asked if she'd seen anyone drop it by. She shook her head, said she hadn't even noticed it there. I walked back over and looked at the book closer. It seemed in exactly the same condition as when I'd handed it to Jake. The weight, the texture, it was all the same. A few of his fingerprints invisibly grabbing the edges of the pages, I'm sure. And as much as it pained me to admit it, I felt like I had to admit that my book was never lost. It was just being held onto until I was ready to come back for it and collect it. Whether someone or something knew I would be there that night, I couldn't say. But a part of me that felt robbed away had been returned on that Halloween night. I flipped inside the cover. There was my name written in it, just below my granddad's. Then the introductory page. I wanted so badly that night to keep flipping through that book, to find some answers, to gain some closure for the loss of Jake. And it's in that sort of aggressive flipping that I feel the pages becoming stiffer. Even the ink on the pages having an unspoken sort of 3D depth I hadn't seen before. Now, as I get to the end of the book, I find blank pages somehow inserted into the spine. Pages unfamiliar and diagrams and strategies unfamiliar to me. And in those pages, I spot a new chapter handwritten, not in my own handwriting, but probably in Jake's. A sort of unseen desperation in the writing's hardness, like he'd pressed into the pages 10 times harder than I would have.
I never could have imagined the remarkable things I'd find in these pages. Storytelling isn't merely a temporary state of mind, but rather a permanent place to escape.
Jake never died. He simply transformed. He'd become a necessary component in my story. And much as I didn't want to admit it, he'd returned the book to me, his short-time storytelling mentor. I took a moment to pray, a moment to reflect. And as I closed up the book that Halloween night, I looked up, not only stunned, but ready for a new beginning. My eyes darted across the room to the barista as she prepped to close up the coffee shop, wiping down the tables and counters. As I stood up to tell her goodbye, she had this look in her eyes that night, just like the one Jake had the last time I'd seen him standing there. And it was in that moment I stood thoroughly convinced that this storyteller was trapped in his own story, his own book in hand with one final lesson to learn. Jake's written words echoing through my mind.
I never could have imagined the remarkable things I'd find in these pages. Storytelling isn't merely a temporary state of mind, but rather a permanent place to escape.
Okay, so if we're getting into a really compelling story. It's about creation, inspiration, and maybe how stories can, well, take over.
Yeah, it centers on these two friends, a storyteller, experienced, and Jake, who's just starting out, wants to be a writer.
And the sources we have, they kind of blur the lines, don't they?
Yeah.
Between just an anecdote and something bigger, an allegory maybe.
Absolutely. And the key thing right up front is the storyteller's core belief. He's got this idea, this real conviction
What's that?
that society right now is just consuming more than we create. It's an imbalance.
Okay, consuming more than creating.
And he genuinely fears that if this goes on, we'll literally run out of things to consume.
Wow, okay. So for him, storytelling isn't just like entertainment.
Not at all. It's fuel, it's vital, it's a way to escape, maybe even survive. Necessary.
That really sets the scene for their main conflict then. They meet up in this coffee shop talking about how you actually create.
Exactly. And their methods are just polar opposites. The source material really highlights this contrast.
Right. Jake, the new guy, he's very methodical. Needs a blueprint, a plan for everything before he starts.
Yeah, almost too planned, maybe? It feels like that's what's holding him back, that rigidity.
While the storyteller, he's the complete opposite. He loves the adventure of not knowing.
Mm-hmm. Starts broad, big picture first, then kind of fills it in, lets the story lead him almost.
And he gives Jake this crucial piece of advice, the key rule, he calls it.
Which is fascinating. He tells him to make something truly shine, you have to learn how to put a small tear in reality.
There's a little slit.
A little slit in the fabric, yeah. Like opening a door to somewhere else.
That's quite a concept. And then he does something huge, right? He lends Jake the book.
The book, the one his grandfather gave him. The very genesis of my storytelling career, he calls it. You can only tell it by its unmarked, really worn spine.
That feels symbolic, passing the torch almost.
It really is, and that's exactly where things take a sharp turn. Because, well, some time passes, and Jake dies. Unexpectedly.
Oh, wow, okay.
And this just devastates the storyteller. He feels like his creativity just vanishes. His portal to escape was sealed up, is how he puts it, just crushed by the loss.
And it's not just the emotional loss, right? The actual book is gone too.
Exactly. Propounding the grief, a relative checks Jake's place after it's cleared out. No book. It wasn't recovered.
So the very thing that started his creative life, his own genesis, it disappears with his friend. You could feel that desperation in the writing.
He's searching, trying to find that portal again, any piece of it. But the story takes another twist.
How so?
Months go by. It's Halloween night. The storyteller's back in their usual coffee shop, maybe trying to recapture something, anything. And there it is, the book, just sitting there in the empty seat where Jake always sat. No explanation, just back.
Whoa. Okay, that's eerie. On Halloween, too.
Right. The timing, the placement, it's all very uncanny, and this reappearance, it's critical to where this whole thing leads.
So what happens when he looks inside? Is it the same book?
Well, yes and no. It is the book, but it's physically altered, changed. How?
There are these new, totally unfamiliar blank pages inserted into the spine, and they're filled with these weird diagrams and strategy.
Diagrams, like Jake's blueprints.
Maybe. It's unclear. But the biggest thing, the real kicker, is a whole new chapter. Handwritten.
Handwritten by Jake.
Almost certainly. The ink is pressed really hard into the paper like it took immense effort, showing this unseen desperation.
And what does it say, this chapter?
It delivers the final lesson. Jake's words essentially say, storytelling isn't merely a temporary state of mind, but rather a permanent place to escape.
A permanent place. So connecting that back, the storyteller realizes, what? Jake didn't just die.
He realizes Jake simply transformed. He became part of the narrative. Jake, Mr. Blueprint, used that tear in reality the storyteller taught him.
To actually escape into the story, permanently.
Exactly. He found his escape by becoming a component of the story itself. It's a profound, slightly terrifying twist.
So the storyteller who preached needing stories to escape the mundane now faces the, let's say, ultimate consequence. He's created a truly permanent escape, and maybe not just for Jake.
What do you mean?
Well, the narrative ends with him feeling trapped in his own story. The moment of realization hits when he's leaving the coffee shop as it closes.
Yeah.
And he sees the barista, looks into their eyes, and sees Jake's familiar look staring back at him.
Chilling. He's inside it now.
Seems that way. He created the escape hatch, and now maybe he can't get back out. Or maybe Jake pulled him in.
So, the big question for you, listening. If storytelling can be this permanent escape, this transformation, what happens when creating the world means you get locked inside it?
Yeah, what kind of remarkable or maybe unsettling things might you find if you really look closely at that little tear in the fabric of your own story? Something to think about.